Hello and welcome back to the Path to Bitcoin. Today, Bitcoin and performance enhancing drugs, right? Is this the next frontier? Does the advantages that adopting a Bitcoin standard in your own personal life, does that give you a performance advantage over your competitors? In a world full of scarce resources where competition is fierce for control over those resources, does operating on a Bitcoin standard make you more efficient? My answer is yes. So I'm going to go over this idea that I've been having in my head about the link between the cognitive enhancements, like almost a nootropic style boost to your ability to reason, to think, to act inside of the physical world, using a Bitcoin lens. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, I guess it's important that we understand why people take, or what the benefits are of performance-enhancing drugs in general, right? In like professional sports. Again, being somewhat linked to the Perth Heat as the chief Bitcoin officer, the sports idea has come up again and again and again on this podcast because, number one, the most obvious thing is professional athletes are very familiar with low time preference, right? They know what it takes they know sacrifice, they know putting off things that they would like to do now, the opportunity cost of training, of pushing your body to the limit, of maximizing skill in one specific area in the hopes that you are able to gain such a level of efficiency that it eventually pays off and your investment in the energy that you have put in is rewarded back to you. And obviously professional sports has a long history with performance-enhancing substances, right? The incentive structures are designed to reward exceptional performance with drastic differences in rewards for individuals who manage to succeed versus the ones that nearly succeed, right? Like that's the worst possible outcome in the sports world is that you invest all of this energy, you make it all the way through the ranks where you're not being rewarded, and then just at the end, just at the finish line, you fall over, right? And the most obvious example of this, or the most clear example of this in my mind is the NFL, the National Football League in the U.S., where there are only 53 roster spots. There are, a ton of individuals who would love to play at that level, and it is brutal and cutthroat. And 1 minute you have a job, and the next you don't. And one season you have a job, and the next you don't. And the difference between making that 53-man roster, they cut it down from 90 some odd players at the beginning of preseason, to the difference between making that roster and not making it is hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Multiple Bitcoin if you are able to make that roster. So there's a incredible incentive to make that roster. And in fact, there's more incentive for abuses of performance-enhancing drugs the closer you get to that line of being cut or not, of making the team or not, right? To gain an edge, athletes are pushing the boundaries of what is and what is not culturally acceptable at that time, right? It used to be thought that, well, you don't need to lift weights because it makes you stiff. And okay, that was okay. Now you can have coffee. How much coffee is performance enhancing, and how much is there a point where it gives you an advantage, but not that much of an advantage? What about creatine? Back in the Mark McGuire days when everyone thought he was taking creatine and he was actually juiced to the tits. Those days. What is culturally acceptable for performance enhancing? When is a little bit of an advantage okay, and when is it get too much? And you get more reward for input input. The risk to reward ratio is so highly skewed by the potential for massive returns, especially in something like the NFL, that, of course, a certain subgroup of any domain can then rationally defend their decision to take a step farther out on the risk curve than their competitors. Because again, if you're that 54th person on a 53-man roster, you have an incredible risk-reward benefit to at least dabbling in performance-enhancing drugs to get you to that line. Because if you get caught, what happens? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're not going to be on the roster, right? You're going to be excluded from the National Football League. Well, you're going to be excluded either way. So you might as well go crazy. Might as well load up. And then at least you have eliminated one of the possible attack vectors, which is you get cut because you're not good enough. Well, if I'm 5% stronger, maybe that makes me good enough. Versus I won't do it. I'll be at a disadvantage, and I'll still end up earning $0 from all of this investment, all of this energy that has gone on to becoming a better football player. So, yes, life is not fair, right? Not all humans are created equal. A certain spectrum of potential athletes just aren't going to have the specific genetic sequences that are advantageous in their chosen fields, right? Others might have those advantages, but some don't. If these athletes, if they rely on their natural biology, they're going to see suboptimal results from their investment, okay? But if they incorporate performance-enhancing drugs into their regimen and are caught, they're in exactly the same position as if they hadn't taken the risk and solely relied on their inadequate biology, skills, or whatever it is. So that is to say, they will be excluded from the profession and the rewards that go along with it. So again, the alternative is if they take performance-enhancing drugs and somehow manage to elude the relevant authorities, that boost that they get, no matter how small, it might be enough to get them over the line. And at a certain level, that potential reward is just too large to deter irresponsible actors. And it's important to understand why these individuals would risk the negative externalities associated with performance-enhancing regimens. Right? If they can boost their productivity, even marginally, they will have access to more opportunity, more potential earnings, more social status, more power, more respect. Essentially, all of these things equate to more energy reserves. Right? They're going to get access to more energy reserves if they undertake this regimen of performance-enhancing drugs. And going back to something that we have talked about on this podcast quite a bit, we know that at the base layer, all human action is undertaken to increase the probability of survival. Right? The main way humans increase the chances that they are able to stick around for another day is to ensure they have access to energy reserves. The more energy reserves, the more they are able to deal with future unknowns. And for athletes, the difference between making the team and the last one cut is astronomical from an energy reserve point of view. Make the team, you're showered with massive energy reserves. Miss out on selection, and the entire investment goes to zero. You can no longer pull energy from the system. And of course, athletes are hyper aware to the sacrifice required as they're confronted with opportunities to diverge their energy every single day. They either make the necessary sacrifices or they don't. They see the impact of those decisions in a much more tangible way than other members of society. Right? If you're constantly, every single day, showing up to work, not knowing if you're going to have a job at the end of the day because someone else is chasing your heels, that is much different than the way your average person in the world interacts with their profession, interacts with their ability to unlock energy. It's completely different, and it makes it very clear in their mind of exactly what they are up against and what they have to do in order to maintain that level. So, okay, that's great. We understand performance-enhancing drugs. Yes, we know all this stuff before we started, right? That lays the base of the argument, which is that Bitcoin is a performance-enhancing upgrade. But it's to the collective wetware of mankind that you can undertake on an individual basis. If the goal is to get more energy reserves, Bitcoin allows humans to unlock more energy. It doesn't matter by what percentage it improves your efficiency. Over time, the compounding effects make even the smallest percentage gains in efficiency. It compounds them to astronomical levels over time. And the more people and the more transactions, the more exchanges that happen on the network where those efficiencies exist, the faster you're going to see those things happen. Which means the more dangerous it is if you miss out on those opportunities. If you ignore that system, you are punished quicker than you were before. And Bitcoin allows humans to unlock more energy by being the best form of money ever invented. Right? Individuals that understand Bitcoin and employ it in their own lives will benefit enormously from it. They will operate at a massive advantage relative to their competitors. This advantage will remain in place until the rest of the field realizes that they are being outcompeted. Again, imagine a world in professional sports where performance-enhancing drugs were never known before. And all of a sudden, it's almost like the Barry Bonds-Balco thing, right? You get around the system by coming up with a drug that has not been banned. And that drug, or that substance in this case, is Bitcoin. And if you can operate on a Bitcoin standard while everyone else is not operating on a Bitcoin standard, you are going to see massive benefits. And those benefits will continue until everyone else realizes what you're doing and knows that those efficiency gains that you are experiencing, those are not only able to be applied to your own position. They can be applied to anyone's position because it is an idea. It is an upgrade to the wetware, right? It is a software upgrade to your brain. As soon as you operate on a Bitcoin standard, you can have a constant in economic calculations. Another way to think about this is often, talked by Michael Saylor about fire, right? Fire, if someone came up to you or if you saw someone using fire, you wouldn't be upset that they showed you fire, and you wouldn't be jealous that they came up with this great idea. You would be thankful, and you would say, "Hello, I would like some fire too, please. Can you share with me? Because you can have fire and I can have fire, and we can both be better for it. Even though you came up with it, doesn't matter. I want it because it's going to make my life better." The same exact thing applies to Bitcoin. And pulling it back to the performance-enhancing drugs things, they are the most prevalent at the highest level of sports, because that is where the risk-reward ratios start to make sense. And that is also where the separation between the best and the rest of the field, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. At a certain level, everybody's pretty good. Everybody's been playing for a certain amount of time. Everyone's built up very similar skills. The things that differentiate the absolute best at a position or at a sport versus the second best is incredibly small. So little tiny advantages, again, become massive. That is what separates individuals. Any tiny enhancement can make a very large difference. And all humans are in competition for scarce energy reserves. As a species, we have evolved to be hyper efficient at accessing energy reserves by lowering the entropy in the world around us. Right? That's what we're doing. We're creating this little order where we have these energy reserves on demand whenever we need them. On an individual level, to make any significant strides against competition, all we need is micro advantages. That's all we need over the competition, because we've gotten so good at unlocking energy reserves. We only need the smallest advantage to have outsized gains, to be able to have an advantage over the competition. Through the compounding effect, any slight efficiency boost leads to dramatically improved outcomes over time. And in the world of energy, there are only two areas to gain efficiency in, right? I'm speaking in the world of unlocking energy for humans through work. Okay? Individuals who adopt Bitcoin are better off than their competitors in both domains. So you've got the unlocking of the energy, which is the work, and then you have the storage or the redeployment of the energy reserves. Individuals who adopt Bitcoin are better in both domains, right? Ability to unlock energy, and then the storage or the redeployment of those energy reserves. You unlock the energy for the first time, transform it from a state where it is not accessible to human beings on demand, ready to be called upon. You transform it into a state where that is the case. You now have it. You have to store it because you're going to need it in the future. That's why you unlocked it in the first place. You're going to need it in the future. The quicker, the better, the faster, the more efficiently you can store it and redeploy it, the more advantages you're going to have, because we know that through transactions, through exchanges, this is how we are able to multiply our energy without us doing any work, right? Without the individual who originally unlocked the energy continuing to do so. And again, just to rehash some stuff that we have previously thought about on this podcast, in my mind, right? What are the advantages in terms of the actual unlocking of the energy, the doing of the work that releases the energy in the first place, that transforms the energy in the first place? Well, more energy is now, if you are operating on a Bitcoin standard, more energy goes into the unlocking, right? Because past energy can't be debased, future calculations are significantly more accurate, right? You have better information to operate on. You know where energy needs to be allocated to. You know when it is worth it and when it is not worth it to you. You don't have to have a second job trying to hold on to your energy reserves. You don't have to spend that energy or expend that energy on those things. All you have to do is the specialization that you have chosen to become an expert in or become a leader in. All you have to do is focus on that, because the storage of that energy takes care of itself with Bitcoin, right? So obviously more energy is going into the unlocking. That's the advantage you get as a Bitcoiner. You do less work for the same level of reward. Okay, if we're verifying the real opportunity cost of our chosen behavior. So if you're a more informed energy allocator, there is less noise and there is more signal, right? Again, another analogy, another way to think about this is a captain at sea. Is it easier to navigate the boat? Is it easier to get to wherever you are, wherever you want to go? Is it easier if the seas are calm and there's not a cloud in the sky, it's a bright blue day? Is that the kind of ship that you would like to be in command of? Or would you like to be in the middle of a hurricane, clouds, fog, rain, everything, giant waves going up and down, right? That is the noise that comes from the markets, because there is so much manipulation in the values. It's like we don't know how accurate that information is. Whereas in Bitcoin, we eliminate all of that, because there's only one way to get Bitcoin. There's only one way to access the network, right? And that is energy in. So you can't fake it. You can't manipulate that market. So all you have is pure signal. Significantly easier. You're going to be more efficient. And what does that allow you to do? Well, the captain on the bright blue day on the calm seas, he can let his attention, his energy wander elsewhere, right? Because the job gets easier and easier of navigating the boat. You don't have to do that. Whereas you need all your attention. You need to be hyper-focused if you are in stormy seas. And then to think about the storage advantages, right? Well, we have instant access to reserves, right? We're able to move money or able to move energy quicker with less friction and less bleed. So we're more able to shift direction based on current conditions, right? There's no point in, again, going back to the captain analogy, there's no point if you can't change directions of the boat on the blue sky day. What's the point of knowing that stuff, right? You still have to be able to release that energy or to deploy that energy when you see that it could be allocated somewhere else to return back even more energy reserves. So you need that ability to shift direction quickly, and nothing is quicker than Bitcoin, right? You just imagine even if you had like a giant stock portfolio that you wanted to get rid of, has to be when the market is open, right? Then you got to get that money. You have to get the fiat balance into your account. You have to move that account to somewhere where you can actually spend it from. Like these things, these little tiny delays, even if it's not days, right? Say it's not the weekend. Say it's just a Monday night, and you have to wait until Tuesday morning to deploy that capital. Those things add up, and they make a big, giant difference over time. Another storage advantage is just foundational certainty. Right? You can plan out further in the future if your energy is properly stored in a fashion that you know can't be confiscated, diluted, or at jeopardy in any other way. Right? You can have the peace of mind. Again, you don't have to think. The energy that you would spend thinking on those things or worrying about those things or having anxiety in that area, you don't have to do that if you're properly custodying the Bitcoin that you have. You know that it can't be confiscated. You know that it can't be diluted. You know that it's not at jeopardy. All those things taken care of, energy no longer has to be pushed in that direction. And then finally, just the easiest one is that it's non-physical, right? There's less energy cost to actually store it. That means saved energy can be put elsewhere. And I'm not unlocking energy and then deploying some of that energy in storage cost. I don't do that. It's free. It's like I often, when I'm orange pilling people for the very first time, I say, imagine that Bitcoin is another dimension. That is where it holds your energy reserves. That's where it holds the value. It's in another dimension. All you have to do is next to you, just pretend that there is a zipper in the fabric of space and time. And you can just zip it open. You can drop your energy or drop your value in there, and then you can zip it back up, and only you can access that. No one knows that it exists. No one can take it from you. No one can seize it. No one can do anything unless you open that zipper, right? That is the world that we are occupying, this other dimension that Bitcoin lives in, that human beings cannot actually stop it, right? We can't stop it. It is a machine that is constantly working as long as energy is being fed into the system. So Bitcoin really is an upgrade to our web, right? It dramatically increases our ability to acquire more energy reserves. The sooner an individual recognizes this, the larger the benefit they're going to receive relative to the population, relative to the competition. So Bitcoin is a performance enhancing protocol that we can volunteer for, right? It's a cognitive enhancing protocol. And cognitive enhancement, right? This is often why you see when people first get orange pilled, they will have such a life-changing or life-shifting perspective on what it means to work, what it means to unlock energy, what it means to store value. That's why people fall down the rabbit hole and begin to change, right? It's often, many people think of it as an almost religious experience because you are confronted with things that you didn't know, and things that you thought were one way turn out to be another. And this cognitive enhancement is an upgrade to the system where you are now operating more efficiently and more aware of your actual surroundings. And this cognitive enhancement is a good idea. It's a good framework to understand it from. But you have to understand what cognitive enhancement actually means, right? It's the cognitive enhancement is the amplification or the extension of your core capacities of the mind through improvement or augmentation of internal or external information processing systems. And that is what adopting a Bitcoin standard does, is we are augmenting an external information processing system. The way that we communicate with each other is the market, right? And we have talked about it many times. The data they are the transactions that are taking place. That is the data. The information that comes from structuring those exchanges, structuring those transactions, that becomes the market price. And the price of what the value of a Bitcoin is that information. So now we know where to allocate it. We can study that information, recognize patterns, and that becomes the knowledge, and then we apply it through intelligence. All right, we can think, okay, well, what are we going to do with that energy to maximize it in our favor? And we know we want to maximize it in a way that means we have more energy reserves after than before. So another way to think of it is cognitive enhancement refers to interventions in the brain that improve attention, concentration, and information processing in executive functions. Well, the executive function is I want to survive, which means I want as many energy reserves as I can possibly have under my control. And that is information processing. If we can process information better, because back to the captain example, the seas are not stormy. They are calm, and we can see miles and miles in front of us. We know when to shift course just a little bit. We can see obstructions. We can see things that are coming up, maybe where it gets shallow, whatever it is. You can see those things better when you operate on a Bitcoin standard. So it is definitely cognitive enhancing. And an enhancement is really, it's an intervention designed to improve human form or function beyond what is necessary to restore or sustain good human health, right? It is the function. By upgrading how we perceive energy, Bitcoiners gain an enormous advantage over the competition. And really, there are three main conceptions of cognitive enhancement. You can augment, you can diminish, or you can optimize. And the first conception considers interventions in the brain as enhancements when they improve some function by increasing its ability to do what it normally does. Right? That is the augmentation side of things. The second one claims that some function can be improved by diminishing the extent of what they do and their effects. And this is really important in the Bitcoin world because you have to think of it that sometimes the diminishment of a capacity or a function under the right circumstances that could plausibly contribute to an individual's overall well-being more, right? More is not always better. Sometimes less is more. So if you're eliminating things from what you have to think about, the energy that you have to expend to calculate your decision-making process, right? The tree of decisions that you flow down. If you can eliminate steps in there, that will make you more efficient. You have less steps to get to the final answer. And then the third conception, right, it takes enhancement to be an intervention that aims at optimizing a specific class of information processing functions, cognitive functions, physically realized by the human brain. So an augmentation example, right? The first one would just be changing your time preference, right? We're just augmenting our time preference. So in the calculations, if you think about it, what advantages do you have if you have a lower time preference? Well, you know that you are going to have access to energy reserves that you previously unlocked in the future. So you can plan ahead. It cannot be debased. And if you know that, then again, you can look further out into the future. And the further you can recognize danger, the further you can recognize opportunities, the more capable you are going to be to react to those things. That's just an augmentation. Yes, you are constantly in your mind when you are making decisions. You're thinking about the opportunity cost of what is to come. You are choosing a time preference. And Bitcoin, through the hard cap and through the idea that you can't have more than 21 million and that it's not going to be debased by anyone ever, you don't have to trust anybody. It's just, that's the way that it is, right? You can remove that trust element. That is the augmentation idea. The diminished side is the trust, right? Just what I talked about. You no longer have to make that extra step of calculation of, do I trust this thing to be true, right? We know that it can only act in that way. There's only one way to get Bitcoin. There's only one way to interact with the network. So the trust is the diminish side of things. And then the optimization side is the 21 million hard cap, right? That optimizes our energy calculations because we have a constant. We are optimizing our thoughts, optimizing the way that we make decisions because of that hard cap, because we have an economic constant, because we can say, we know exactly what the value is out of what. And then finally, just a little side thing. A side note on cognitive enhancement and what it can do for your own life is that it isn't just in the realm of making these calculations and these ideas as it relates to choices with work or finance or whatever it is. It actually leads to moral enhancement, right? If you up the ability for your cognitive skills, for your ability to function at a high level, it actually leads to moral enhancement. And this is something that you often hear from people that get into the Bitcoin world, that they feel like something has shifted and they can't quite put their finger on it. And often it's attributed to some sort of religion or higher calling or something. But it comes down to enhancing cognitive capacities associated with reasoning. That can be a component of enhancing moral sensitivity, right? Because as we do that, what is reasoning, right? That's thinking, think, understand, and form judgments logically. So the more logically you can do those things, the more reasoning that you have, or the better your reasoning is. So by enhancing our cognitive capacities that are associated with reasoning, well, that could help. That could enhance moral sensitivity in recognizing and responding to the rights, the needs, and the interests of others. Right? The other component would involve enhancing affective capacities such as empathy and trust. Enhanced cognitive and affective capacities could result in moral progress by promoting behavior that would reduce the incidence of humans harming other humans and result in greater well-being for all. Now, does that sound familiar? I mean, we've often heard the Space Force dude talk about this idea that proof of work will lead to mutually assured prosperity, right? Because we need to create this energy in order to secure the network. And as more and more energy is created, that is better for humanity. Right? So everyone, it is mutually assured preservation. It's like we will get better because we will have more energy, and it's in everyone's best interest to continue to get more access to more energy. And this is what happens through Bitcoin. You realize that whatever is better for the network, me doing this podcast, someone out there listening to it, if that grows their conviction, if they go out and orange pill one other person, even if they don't orange pill another person, if they go out there and they realize that, well, my energy is better stored here, because in Bitcoin, if I store my energy there, I can immediately trade my energy for a piece of the network. Someone who has made that trade on the other side can take my energy, and if they are successful at unlocking more energy, they bring it back to the network. I benefit, they benefit. Everyone inside of the network benefits. If anyone anywhere in the world that is a participant in the network comes up with a more efficient way to do something or does any work, everyone benefits from it. It is shared. And so Bitcoin can actually enhance it can lead to moral enhancement. And it's like the wolf example that people often talk about, where when there are two competing wolves for the alpha position and they get into a fight, the person who is, or the wolf that ends up on top, the wolf that defeats the other one, doesn't kill the other wolf because that would be detrimental to their own survival. They need the other wolf. They need the second best because that makes the pack stronger, because then they can project more force, more energy when they have a stronger pack together. So they don't want to kill off the other ones. They want to keep those people because the pack understands at a very fundamental level that they need as much energy as they can possibly muster because it allows them to be more efficient. Right? They can get access to more scarce resources if their numbers are greater and they're all aligned in a similar goal. And that goal is to get as much energy reserves as they possibly can. That's what they're doing every single day. They're hunting down energy reserves. And they realize, at a very primal level, that together we can do more. Right? Together we can be more effective. We can be more efficient. And that is what Bitcoin leads people to do. It leads people to feel like they are part of something bigger because they are. Because that is what we are hunting down, energy reserves every day. And the more energy reserves that someone else makes available, plugs into the system, everyone wins. So that was a big one. That was long. And hopefully I made some sense in there. But this is the thing that I'm thinking, is that Bitcoin really is a performance-enhancing protocol. If you adopt it in your own life, you gain advantages that other people don't have. Yet they exist, and they're not illegal. And they can have those same opportunities as you. It's like fire. If they recognize this idea, if we don't even need to spell it out for individuals, just by the fact that Bitcoiners will be more efficient in making these calculations of doing the math behind the opportunity cost of deploying capital, deploying energy in one area versus another. If we can see clearer than everyone else around us, like personally, we can be in calm, blue sky waters, whereas everyone around us can be in the worst, choppiest seas ever, because Bitcoin is outside the system. It can't be manipulated. So operating from a vantage point like that gives us extreme advantages. And as those add up over time, more and more energy reserves will flow to individuals who operate in this space in this way. And people will recognize that. They will recognize it so much so that they will not be able to resist. At a certain point, they have to capitulate and they have to join because those advantages will be so large.